Welcome to a lovely 9 o'clock morning session. My name is Russ Roberts. I'm a product engineer on the ArCGIS Online team, and I focus on the scene viewer, 3D layers, the scene layers, and elevation layers. And with me is Raluca.
Hi everyone, I'm Raluca. I work from the Zurich office in Switzerland. We build there the 3D part of the JS API, but we also build the scene viewer in ArCGIS Online. And we also have another team that works on City Engine, and then another one works on ArcGIS Urban. I'm a product engineer just for the JavaScript API though. I build demos, write documentation, do some testing, and yeah, basically also what Russ does for the online.
And we're going to show you today how you can kind of think about building your own 3D applications with the ArcGIS JavaScript API. So a little overview of what we'll be talking about today. So we're just going to give you an introduction in 3D, talk about some of the 3D layers that are supported within the API, how you can think about representing these layers in your scenes. We'll also do a little deep dive into web scenes and how you can leverage them within the application you're going to build and how they can make things a little bit easier for you when you're building that application. And then Raluca is going to go into a little bit of a show and tell of her creating a app with a building scene layer. Do you want to tell them about it?
Right. So we're going to take the scene that Russ creates and we're going to build a custom app. We're going to use the Sketch API to draw some features in our scene. And then I'm going to show you that building scene layers are actually like scene layers, but with tons of data in them. And we're going to apply renders to them. And yeah, that's about it.
Cool. So let's talk about 3D. So what is 3D in ArcGIS Online, or if you're a portal user within the enterprise? It's composed of scene layers, but you can also use your 2D layers. So that would be like a point feature layer, lines and polygons, but you could also represent them with 3D symbols. You could extrude those polygons to make them look like simple buildings as well. And then you can also use elevation layers, which are image services with cached tiles in a lurk format. You can also use your map image layers within scenes. So you don't have to think about, oh, I'm creating 3D, I need to have 3D data. You can use your 2D features as well within these scenes and represent them in 3D if you wanted to, or you can still represent them as 2D features. And so we're using these services to stream them into your apps that you're building, or if you're using some of the out-of-the-box ones that we provide. And we're going to be showing you how you can combine your 2D features with your 3D ones as well. So if you're using a 3D object scene layer for complex buildings, you could then also use a point of interest feature layer for just showing points like where coffee shops are around those buildings. And you can use smart mapping to create a rich visualization to, let's say, look at mortgage rates, or not mortgage rates, the cost of buildings within those building scene layers, or within the building layers, because you're using the attributes that are stored within these scene layers to give them a smart mapping visualization as well. And we're going to be showing you how you can use these web scenes as this kind of core building block to use them within your applications. So in Scene Viewer or with Pro, when you're creating these web scenes, you can then use them within let's say a 3D web app builder application, some of the configurable apps, or using the API to build something just from scratch. And when we're building these scenes, you might want to think about, hey, am I trying to show things in a global scene or in a local scene? And just a little bit of information about what is a global scene and a local scene. Global scenes, they support cached layers that are in Web Mercator or WGIS 84. When you're using tiled layers like vector tile layers, tiled map services, and your elevation layers, all these cached layers, you want to make sure you're following the same tiling scheme as well. So that's something you want to think about, we can't reproject these cached layers on the fly. So when you're using a combination of these layers, you want to make sure you're following the same kind of tiling scheme. And then for scene layers also, you want to make sure that because they're also cached, that they're following the same projection that you're using. And you can use in these global scenes as well, you can visualize content that is above the ground, or you can also allow navigation below the ground within those global scenes. Another thing that you can think about is you might want to use a local scene. And these local scenes support any projected coordinate system. Same kind of concepts of following the same tiling scheme, like with global scenes. You want to make sure all your cached layers are in that same coordinate system. You can clip the extent of your local scene. You can do it from Pro in the scene viewer, or you can do it within the actual code itself. And local scenes have always had an underground navigation option. So you've been able to look at subsurface features, let's say like earthquakes or utilities in a local scene since we've had support for them. To talk a little bit more about it, here's Raluca.
I'm going to switch to mine. How many of you have used the JavaScript API so far? Okay, so about half. So maybe this code doesn't look that unfamiliar to you. This is just like the basics to create this globe displayed here on the right. It's similar to 2D, just that instead of creating a map view, you create a scene view. But for example, the layer container, the map, is the same. You define a map, you pass in the base map, you can pass in layers. In my case here, I don't have layers, but just to show you how you would set that. And then you create the view, which is basically the display of your data. And in our case, it's a scene view. And to make it a global view, scene view, you just have to set the viewing mode to global. Then for the local scenes, you would set the viewing mode to local, and optionally you can also pass in a clipping area, and that will clip your scene to a certain extent that you pass in there. Yeah, that's about it. So it's fairly easy. Another super important concept in 3D is the camera that people sometimes struggle with. This is mainly like, where am I looking at the point where you're looking at your data from. You just have to imagine yourself in space out there looking at that map, and the point where you are, that's your camera position. It also has, like, I tried to display it there in that graphic as good as possible for you to understand. Like, the tilt is the angle that your viewing direction makes with the perpendicular to the ground. And then you also have the heading, which is basically like in 2D, your angle with the north direction. And then by setting all these, then you get the camera position, and that's very important. Like, every scene view has to have a camera position. You have to have a point where you're looking at your data from. Navigation in 3D. We have, similar to 2D, a go-to method, and you can pass in, I call this method like a magic method, because you can pass in a lot of things in there. You can pass in a camera position, you can pass in a geometry or a bunch of graphics, and it will just zoom to the extent of that graphic collection or to that geometry, basically in such a way that you look at those graphics. Right, so again, it's like fairly easy to navigate programmatically. And then there's also the navigation. We support touch navigation. You can navigate using the mouse, using keyboard, and we also implemented support for gamepads. So in case you want to program some games, you can go ahead and do that. And I'm going to pass it on to you for elevation layers.
Yep, you can switch me over to. So you can also use elevation layers. I've mentioned this a couple times earlier in the presentation within your scenes. Out of the box, Esri provides a world elevation layer for you, but you can also use your own elevation data. So if you have some DEMs that you want to publish to ArCGIS Online or to Enterprise, you can do that from Pro very easily. It's just the same share as a web layer, and that will begin the caching process to build this elevation layer. And You can use, if it's following the same tiling scheme as the like Esri's world elevation tiling scheme, you could use your, let's say your high accuracy DEM with the Esri elevation layer. If you wanted to give a full scene context, you can mash the two of them together. Or you could just say, hey, I don't want to use the Esri one and I just want to use my own. You can decide that during the authoring process. And how you can use these elevations within your application that you're creating, it's very easy. It's very similar to how you might kind of say, I want to use the gray canvas base map. You're just setting for the ground world elevation. And then we're using the elevation layer within your scene. Or you can say, I want to point to the direct elevation layer. Let's say I create it in ArCGIS Online or on my server, and I'm just pointing to my own image service.
And now let's talk about visualization. So this is a very, I have 2 slides in this presentation about visualization. We have a more in-depth session later on at 4 today. If you guys want to learn more, you can drop by. But basically, the basic things are you can use symbols the way you do in 2D, but we also have special 3D symbols. We like to call them volumetric symbols because they are based on real-world units. So for a point, you could symbolize a point with 3D models or with primitives, for example, in that image below, it would be cones or cubes or spheres. And the measurement unit that you pass for these symbols is then meters or feet. They have to be real-world units. For the line symbol, we have a path symbol layer, and then for polygons, you can use extrusion to extrude those polygons based on attributes. Then the classical symbols that you're familiar with in 2D, we also support those. And as you know them, they use screen size units, points and pixels, just classical icons or line symbols or the fill symbol for the polygon. Additionally to that, in 3D we have 3D geometry, so scene layers, for example, buildings. Those have a special symbol, we call it mesh symbol, and here is an example of how you would set such a symbol. So in 3D, we always have a symbol and the symbol layers because you might add several symbol layers to the symbol. But in this example, we kept it simple. So you basically, for a scene layer with buildings, you would have a mesh symbol with the fill symbol layer where you can pass in the color, or there's another property that allows you to specify how it should interact with the texture. Should it multiply the texture with the color, or should it remove the texture? A bunch of handy properties like that. And with that, I'm going to pass it on to Russ to talk about web scenes.
Cool. And just one thing to also add about the symbols, we do support publishing your own 3D symbols to ArCGIS Online and to Enterprise Portal. So let's say you wanted to create a windmill farm and you looked at our really rich 3D library of symbols and you're like, oh, we don't have any windmills here. Or it doesn't, or if we have a model that doesn't match exactly what you want. Well, in using ArcGIS Pro 2.2 and up, you can share web styles to ArcGIS Online or to Portal, and those web styles could just be originally OBJs that you brought into Pro, and you're sharing them and you're creating your own 3D symbol gallery. So I have a blog up on the Esri blog site talking about how you can actually publish these 3D symbols and use a rotation attribute to direct the actual direction of the facing of that symbol within the scene.
And I have one more thing now that you mentioned that. So you can publish your symbols using Pro, and now with the GLTF support, you can also use GLTF models that you can use for symbolizing your points, and you you can just load them from your file system. So for that, you wouldn't need to publish them. So it depends. If you want to persist your models, then you would go the pro way, where you publish them as web styles. But if you have an application, I'm going to show you to you in my demo later how this works. Then you can just pass a URL to where your model is located in GLTF format, and then we will take it and display it for you. So I'm going to show this in the demo.
Cool. Thank you. So let's talk a little bit about web scenes. You can author your web scenes using the scene viewer in like ArCGIS Online and Portal, but you can also use Pro to share web scenes, just like you're sharing web maps from ArCGIS Pro to online. When you're also sharing up these web scenes to online and Portal, you can also publish all your layers then as well. So let's say you have some multi-patches for buildings within your scene that you're authoring in Pro, and you want to publish this all to ArCGIS Online. You don't have to run a series of different tools. You can simply just click Share Web Scene, and then that will begin the process of building that 3D object scene layer that we'll use in ArCGIS Online and Portal, and the actual web scene, and we'll carry across the properties across that common spec. Within these web scenes, you can use slides to capture things like environment, and in the case of like for building scene layers, you can capture what layers are on and off within your actual scene. And with these web scenes, same thing with like a web map, you get an item ID, and then you can easily use this within the app that you're building. And these web scenes contain the information, like the visual variables that you could be authoring, like the smart mapping styles, the custom web styles that you publish up. These web scenes will contain all that information to like persist it. If you wanted to pop this web scene into multiple applications, you don't have to kind of continually spec this out on your own. You can just use that web scene as that delivery method to your apps. And these web scenes are composed of all the layers that you're adding that are supported within 3D. So your feature layers, your map image layers, scene layers, elevation layers, WMTS layers, so there's the full swath. They contain, like I mentioned before, things that you set within the environment settings, like your shadows, the time of day. So let's say you have a building and you're a proposed building, and you want to share it out to your constituents, and you can also have this environment widget available to you, so that way they can toggle around to see where the shadows are going to cast during January, and then compare it to where the shadows will actually cast in June, and see if they, have any comments or feedback for you. And these scenes you'll see in the spec itself, they can be in global and local, and that's just a property within the scene itself. And if you want to learn a little bit more about web scenes, we have the spec actually on developers for you to check out. Same with the web map. And any new properties that we add to the web scene within the releases throughout the year, the spec is continually updated. So if you wanted to look in if we add it in like a filter, anything for like a definition filter, then you could check it out here within the web scene spec if you wanted to take a little bit of a deeper dive. So let's talk a little bit about scene layers. Scene layers are a 3D layer that we use across the platform. You can use scene layers not only in web scenes and in web scenes, in like the scene viewer and the API, you can use these scene layers as well, like in ArcGIS Earth, in a runtime application. You can bring them back into Pro if you wanted to. They're cached layers, so just like a 2D tile layer, you do have to build up these like 3D tiles that exist in this cache. So if you make any changes to, let's say, the associated feature layer, if one exists, or the source data, you will have to update your cache to get that those changes to be pushed through. And we have a swath of different scene layers. If you're familiar with 3D, up to the December release of ArCGIS Online in 2018, we had 4 main scene layers. There was point, that are great for showing millions of point features within a scene. because we do a thinning model with it, you can bring this massive point scene layer into ArcGIS Online, into the scene viewer or 3D web scene. If you wanted to represent, let's say, buildings or multi-patch features, the 3D object, like a building shell, I should say, or other multi-patch features like a geology or ore body, you could use a 3D object scene layer. If you wanted to look at realistic features and of buildings, trees, almost like an elevation appearance, the integrated mesh scene layer, which can be built with drone to map, and some of our business partners like Vricon as well can generate integrated mesh scene layers. And if you have any LiDAR or LAS data, you can use a point cloud scene layer to represent that. And even though, let's say you cooked your point cloud scene layer, but you have RGB values, you have classification, we have the elevation values, you can use smart mapping styling to represent your point cloud scene layer multiple ways, even after you've cached it, because those attributes exist within the cache. And the latest one that we're going to be showing within the sample application that we're going to build today and show you how to publish it is the building scene layer. I don't know if you are familiar with it. We released it just in December, and this allows you to publish up your Revit models to ArcGIS Online, and coming in Portal 10.7, you'll be able to generate a scene layer package from the Revit model in ArcGIS Pro, and publishing a scene layer from that scene layer package. Excuse me. And just a little bit more information about that building scene layer, if you're not familiar with it. These building scene layers allow us to visualize these complex models of like stairs, railing, office furniture, doorways, walls, everything. And we give you an experience to actually interact with the building scene layer within the API and the scene viewer itself as well. And if you want to generate these building scene layers, you'll need the Revit model, but you also have to use ArcGIS Pro 2.3 to generate that scene layer package, and using ArcGIS Online and 10.7 to publish it. And how to actually create these scene layers in ArcGIS Online, because I've got to kind of run through all of the 5 different types that are available. You can create them multiple different ways. I also have a great blog that you can check out as well, and I can link to later at the end of the session for you. You can use ArcGIS Pro to create scene layer packages, and these scene layer packages can be used locally, or you can publish them up to Enterprise and Portal, and that package will generate a scene layer from it. It's the same way as like if you had tile packages and you upload them to ArcGIS Online or to Portal, that creates a tile layer. So it's the same model there. But then you can also create scene layers with an associated feature layer that gives us a kind of like additional capabilities because we're leveraging the feature layer behind it. So from Pro, you would just do the simple share as a web layer, and that would generate that scene layer for you, which has an associated feature layer. Or you could do it actually directly from ArcGIS Online. Let's say you uploaded a zipped GDB of multi-patch features. Because you don't have access to ArcGIS Pro. So you just upload that zipped GDB of multi-patch features. That will spin up a feature layer for you, and from that feature layer we can publish a 3D object scene layer. And with that, as we're moving forward, because that 3D object scene layer that we published from that source file geodatabase, we are working towards bringing an editing experience in. So that way, let's say you're changing the attributes of your buildings or the multi-patch features in an application that supports editing these the feature layer like ArcGIS Pro does. You can change the shape of your multi-patches through using that associated feature layer, and then we'll partially rebuild that cache. That's available in Enterprise 10.7, and it'll be coming in probably the UC release of ArcGIS Online. You can also use the associated feature layer to help drive the pop-up information. And if let's say you want to be able to search for buildings within your scene, you can use like a feature search against your 3D object scene layer to search for, let's say, a Union Station. And what we're really doing, we're querying the feature layer behind the scene, but then we're able to highlight and use the go-to to zoom in on that actual feature itself within the scene. And if you want to learn more about the different scene layers. Raluca has actually created a great guide topic, sorry, thank you, to kind of go through the different scene layers in a deeper dive and covering like the publishing side of things as well. But then she also has kind of like a chart of what can I do with this scene layer that doesn't have a associated feature layer, and what can I do with this scene layer now that it does have an unassociated feature layer with it. And I've kind of covered this a couple times, and I'm going to show you how do you actually create these scenes. You can use ArcGIS Pro, which I'm going to show in a second, or you can use the scene viewer, and you can use the API itself that supports writing out web scenes to author them. And with it, with this, you're able to set up the styling, pop-ups, filtering, and like environment slides. So let's actually let's talk about the demo a little bit and show some cool stuff. So we're gonna go through and start showing you how you actually build like this building scene layer that you see in the slide, and how you can leverage it with the API. So you might have seen the building scene layer maybe, or building I should say, in some other sessions, or just kind of talked about it and seen it around the islands. And you're like, hey, how do I get a Revit model into Pro? And it's not as scary as it sounds. You don't have to use any other tools. There's no like, I need to start exporting this out as this, or I need to convert it here. There's none of that. We just simply need to go to the add data button, and you just go to your folder where your Revit models exist, and you'll see it here. And you simply hit OK, and that just adds that Revit model into the scene here in Pro. I'm not converting it. This is just one that we generated for ourselves for a building example. But if you have your own Revit models itself, you're simply just clicking add that Revit model to my scene in Pro. And then you get all the different breakouts of what exists within your Revit model. So we're pulling that across, and we're continually building out as we want different kind of groupings of your Revit models. We're expanding the support. So I can toggle layers on and off that exist within this Revit model. This hasn't been converted to a series of, let's say, multi-patches and in a file geodatabase. I haven't converted anything. When you do that add layer, it's still just a Revit model. And as you can see, you can have the breakout of all the different layers that I can toggle on and off here. Now, if I wanted to actually build this up as a scene layer within ArcGIS Online and Enterprise 10.7, I would just go to the geoprocessing tools, and you can just search create scene if you wanted to. And you'll see that we have all these different types of scene layer packages that you can create. So if you wanted to create a point scene layer, you can just use the point scene layer package. But in this case, I have a Revit model, so I'll be using the create building scene layer package. And when you open that up, you're just pointing towards your Revit model. And what that does, that'll just begin bringing over that Revit model into this scene layer package. It's not converting it to anything else. There's no like middleman file geodatabase or anything. It's really just taking this Revit model and bringing it into our scene layer, and that scene layer package. And once that finally outputs that scene layer package, we simply just need to go to ArcGIS Online, and you can do add item from my computer, and we support multi-part uploads. So if you have a very large, let's say, scene layer package that you've created in Pro or from the Revit model, you can upload it from in the browser, because we're using multi-part. It can handle the size. Or if you want to use a dedicated tool for a large point cloud scene layer, I would recommend you using the share package tool in ArcGIS Pro as well. So if you, let's say, are walking away from your browser and you want to run, because it's such a large package that you're uploading to your portal or to online, I would recommend using the share package tool in Pro. But they're both doing the same concept of a multi-part upload, and that's how it's able to kind of move these large packages. So you would just do like add item from my computer, and then you're just going to find that output scene layer package that you got from your Revit model using Pro. And once you add it to this, it detects, okay, this is a supported package type. Let's begin the publishing process, and it'll upload that scene layer package and begin publish a hosted scene layer for you. And after you have that done, just for the series, just for time, this is what you get. It looks, what you're seeing right here is the overview model of your building scene layer. So we're not rendering all the features at once. We're using the overview that kind of has a generalization of the building. But if you want to see all those breakouts, we have a new widget called the Building Explorer that you get on the right-hand side. And here you can see that we have all the different layers that you saw within Pro. And then you can start toggling some of them off because Raluca doesn't want to have like the walls. Let's take out these like structural columns, and we can do like the stair railing. And then we have this like super kind of like, we're just changing this on the fly, and we're able to kind of poke in and see like the different office spaces that's going on. You can also use some of the other tools that are available. They're widgets within the scene viewer, but they're also available for you in the API for an application that you're building yourself. So like base maps, you can use all our gallery or a custom gallery. You can use no base map at all, and even like, let's say I wanted to look at the base map, or the basement of this building scene layer. Well, it's hidden with the ground. I can toggle the ground transparency, and I can actually see what's underneath there, if there's any utilities, piping, anything like that. Then we also have, I talked about this earlier, the like daylight and environment settings. So this is let's say a proposed building that we wanted to put in our campus, and we might want to see what the impact is for the surrounding buildings or houses. So I can simply, just using the daylight widget, start changing the time of the day to see where the shadows go, and it can even go and see what it would look like across the different months as well. And you can store all of the I could set it up for my users. Let's say I don't think they need to interact with the actual widget itself. I want to give them a very simple application. I can go ahead and start capturing slides to pick up the different times of the day, to give it a more easier navigation for them. Also, some of your users might find 3D navigation complicated, and using slides are very helpful to kind of give them a touch experience where they can kind of just click through predefined areas of interest. And you could be setting this all up in the scene viewer, and if Raluca is building an application that supports and she wants to display slides, well, she can just read this from the actual web scene spec that's within it, and not have to set up any of the custom like kind of camera views or anything like that. She can just read it directly from these slides. We also have a series of measurement tools. Here I could go ahead and might want to measure what the distance is from the carport to the front entryway. I can go ahead and do that measurement. It supports like horizontal and vertical like planar measurements. So if I wanted to go up the side of a building, I can measure that, but I couldn't wrap it around like let's say a complex model. So it goes off of a planar surface. I can also say I might want to think about what's the area in the front because I want to put in a nice koi pond or something like that. I can go ahead and just do a little area measurement, and here I can see, I have this kind of 164 square meters to kind of like play with here to put in a nice koi pond, and I can update the vertices at any point in time while I'm measuring it. Another tool, but Raluca's kind of show you how you can put this within your app, is the slice widget as well. And within the scene viewer, you could, let's say I could pull back the building and expose all the HVAC system and do a measurement of all the HVAC within this building if I wanted to, and use these widgets together to kind of get a little bit more out of the, let's say the little visual analysis that I'm doing. So that's great. I created a scene. I'm just going to clean up my slides because Raluca doesn't need them. Set to the middle of the day. let's say I make all these changes, I can just go ahead and I'm just going to save my web scene. This was one I've already made, so I'm just kind of, I can make the updates, or I'll give it a different title. And all I need to do then is just send Raluca this new item ID. I don't have to send her a reference to all the other layers that I want her to use. I can just be like, hey, here you go on Slack, send her the item ID and say, good luck with the rest of the session, thanks, have a good day, and then she can begin. So to do the full handover now to Raluca, we're going to show you how to actually kind of use this web scene within the API. Thank you.
Thanks, Russ. So let's have some JavaScript fun, huh? All right. So Russ created the scene, and every item that you create in online has an ID. And we use that in the API to simply like, I'm going to make this. Can you see? Should I make it bigger? So this item ID, you can use it in the API to actually load elements. So I could load feature layer items, for example, or in my case, I'm going to load the web scene that Russ created. And the way I do that is I just have to instantiate the web scene and then pass in the portal item ID like this. And then, of course, I have to also create a view where I pass in this web scene to actually display it. So I'm going to have them side by side like this. I have some more code here that doesn't really affect this, and I'll just comment it out as we go. But the first thing that I want to do is actually load this web scene and display it here in my browser tab. So when I reload this now, you'll be able to see the web scene that Russ created with the building scene layer. The next thing that I want to do, so I want to create, I want to add the slice widget first, right? So for that, I'm going to use this function here that creates a slice widget. First, I pass in the view, and that's all I need to do. But then I want to have an expand widget that I can click to turn the slice widget on and off. And the expand widget takes as a content my slice widget then. And what I do to actually turn it on and off, this is a pattern that we will change. It's not, hopefully we'll get it done by UC, but to actually turn off the slice widget, you need to destroy it and recreate it. So I'm watching for the expanded property of the expand widget, and when it's expanded, then I create a slice widget and I pass in the view, and then I set it as a content on the expand widget. And then I call this method because I don't want the user to click the new slice button, so I create it for him. Then when I close the expand widget, then I just go ahead and destroy the slice widget. As I said, we're going to change this, but for now, this is how you would do it. So now if I reload this, because I have it here, right, you're going to see a slice, an expand, actually, the expand widget here. And when I click on it, then I already activated my, my slice widget. And I can start slicing through the building. We actually added this with the building scene layers, the slice widget, because the building scene layers contain so much information that you actually need some tools to help you visualize it better. And it also goes in slices through the ground. So you can use it actually for any layer, and not just for building scene layers. And what Russ was saying, let's exclude some layers. I want to exclude, for example, the windows. So now when I go and slice it down like that, the windows still remain. So it's super, super practical for this. All right, this is how you add the slice widget. Then next, what I want to do, I want to add, this is part of the Sketch API that I also demoed in the plenary. I want to add a green area in front of the building. And to do that, this is now when this code up here becomes useful, because, I need a graphics layer that I'm going to be able to sketch on, to draw on, and I'm adding it to the web scene. And I'm defining a sketch view model. You can also add this, we have a sketch widget that you can directly add and you get all the functionality out of the box, but here I'm showing you how to make it a little bit custom. So for the sketch view model, the basic thing that you need is a graphics layer and the view that you're going to apply it to. But then in my add green area drawing tool function, I'm also setting the polygon symbol, which has some shade of green here. And I want to make it so that when the user clicks on the Draw Green Area button, he starts creating a polygon. My Draw Green Area button is down here, so I just added it to the body as an element. And then another thing that I'm doing is, this is not in-built functionality. I want that when my graphic is selected and I press delete, I want to be able to remove it and to reset the sketch view model so that it doesn't draw anything anymore. And this is just, the last line is just a bit of, it's a utility, how to say it, to call it, yeah, more like an utility method that we have so that you can add components that you defined in your body. You can add them to the view UI. Like this, you don't have to go in CSS and say, oh, position absolute left 0 and so on. We add it automatically for you to the point where you specify it. So this would be like my top right view. And you can pass in an index because here I already have my slice, my expand widget, so I want to put it on top of that expand widget. I want to make it show up first, so I pass in this index. So this is what my Add Green Area drawing tool does. And now if I reload, because I think I commented it out, yeah. Then you'll be able to see this button over here. And I'll wait until my scene completely loads. And when I click it, then I can start drawing. And then I can go in there and I can move it around. And then if I click one more time, then I get access to the vertices and I can go and adjust them. I can create a new vertex if I want, or I can delete it. So it's just the Sketch API, as maybe some of you know it already from 2D. We just adapted it to 3D. All right, so now I have this green area here. Oh, I actually wanna, this bothers me. I wanna make it like a bit, now we're fine. The other thing that I want to show you is how to add your custom 3D models in this. And I found a really kind of silly use case. I'm going to add a ping pong table to my building because like this is the building in the Esri campus, right? I think employees could really use a ping pong building. So I made another method here that I'm commenting out, add ping pong table drawing tool. Very useful. And this time, I'm using the same sketch view model it's basically just drawing points in your scene, but your points will have a 3D symbol. So what I'm doing is I'm setting the point symbol on the sketch view model to this one over here, which has, so this is a 3D point symbol with an object symbol layer, but in the resource, I'm passing, instead of passing like sphere or cone or cube, I'm passing a reference to the GLTF model. And where can you get these GLTF models? One website is Sketchfab, another one is TurboSquid. I got my ping pong table from the low poly assets website from Google. So I'm going to search for the ping pong table, and the one I choose is this one over here. And you can just go and download it and then place it in your folder. And I already have mine over here. So this is my folder, and you can see this is the GLTF file. And then it also has a binary file for all the geometry. So I'm passing in this file over here in my reference. Setting the symbol on the sketch view model, and then again when the user clicks on add table, button, then I'm going to activate the widget to start creating points. And this part over here is special for 3D in a way because, actually it's not special for 3D. It activates the updating mode of the sketch view model, which will add some handles. I will show them to you in a minute, so that you can actually manipulate the 3D model, like scale it, make it bigger, make it, rotate it, or move it around. And then the last line is again adding my add table button to my view UI over here on the right. So now when I reload, then I have this add ping pong table button here. And then once I click on it, I can click on my scene where I want to add the ping pong table. And this is a huge ping pong table. I can move it around. I can rotate it. And then I'm going to scale it down now because it's way too big. So this is all given by, when it goes into update mode, the sketch view model detects that it's a 3D model as a symbol, and then it adds these handles for you over here. And then if I go again on update, then I can move it again. So this is something specific to 3D. You don't have those handles in 2D, sorry. All right, so now we added a ping pong table, we added a green area, we added the slice widget. I have one more function, which is a bit of, again, a funny thing because probably you wouldn't really need this, but what I want to show you is this building layer that Russ created is basically, it works like the scene layers, so I can apply renders to it, you can have pop-ups, you can set definition expression on the sublayer. So it's like a scene layer, but with a lot of data. And what I'm going to do here I'm just going to demo the renderer, setting a renderer. And for that, I thought I would just turn my scene entirely into a blueprint. So I'm going to apply a renderer to all of the sublayers in my building layer that will make the faces will be transparent. I'm passing here alpha 0, and I will set edges to white. And another thing that I need to do for that is I'm setting the ground opacity to 0, so I'm basically disabling everything. I don't want to be able to see the ground. I'm also setting the background color of the web scene to 0. I'm disabling the stars, the atmosphere, turning off shadows, just to make it look like this kind of drawing, like a blueprint draw. And again, the last thing I'm doing here is I'm adding my button to my scene. So let's see what a blueprint would look like with the building scene layer. Did I comment this out? Oh. Sorry. Suspense. All right, I'll wait until it loads, and then I'm clicking the Convert to Blueprint button. Wow, that was fast. So yeah, this is more like a gimmick just to show you guys that you can apply renders and style them as you want, these building scene layers. There is some magic to it because they contain a lot of data, but basically they work exactly the same. So for example, now I can go and slice something in here. Let's see what that looks like. So it will just work exactly the same with slicing, and yep, that's basically it. Time for questions, I think. That's all I had to show you.
Yep, and I'll just show the 2 blogs that I kind of referenced earlier as well. We can switch back to Raluca's screen if we want to afterwards. So here's the one where I talked about how you can publish your own 3D symbols to ArCGIS Online into Portal. And in this case, I kind of just go through how you get some wind turbines published up from Pro, and how you can set the default kind of rotation angle on it. And it's really just like a kind of explanation and kind of a little bit of a deep dive where you can go through and see how you can set up your own web style gallery and use it within a web scene and play around with it. And you could even grab the item ID for this scene itself and load it into the load a basic web scene sample on developers if you wanted to check it out in the API to know that it's not just something special that we're doing within the scene viewer. And here's the other one, how to publish scene layers in ArCGIS Online. And this kind of goes through the kind of a deep dive as well on kind of giving you a little bit more information about the different scene layer types and how you're going to be publishing them up. So thank you so much, and yeah, we can answer some questions for you.
I have one more thing. This slide is important. These guys fill up the survey so that we know how to improve this presentation for next year. I actually read all the comments that people write. Yep, time for questions now.
Yep. I don't know the specifics so the question was about other file formats similar to the Revit and being able to add it into Pro similar to what I showed. I don't know the exact timeline for supporting it. I can show you who the point person would be at the island to talk about that, sorry. But for now, I think for this year, it'll just be Revit right now. Cool, thank you. Yes? Yeah, the question was, which version of Pro supports adding this Revit model and being able to create that building scene layer package? And yes, that came in Pro 2.3, which rolled out in January. It might have popped up as just an update kind of notification if you use ArcGIS Pro, and that will get you to the latest and greatest with that kind of create building scene layer package tool. Yeah, and so support for the building scene layer is coming in 10.7, which I believe is rolling out the end of March. And it's the exact same workflow that you saw in ArcGIS Online that I kind of skimmed over. You can use the share package tool and share it to your portal instance, or you can use the under my content because you're logged into portal and do add item from my computer, and that just will do that same upload and publish into a building scene layer for you. Cool. Yep. Yep. So the question is once, excited kind of about Revit and being able to define the projection and move it around in Pro before you create that building scene layer package. And yes, you can. So it's not locked into it. Let's say you popped it into your scene and it's not lining up correctly to your base map for some projection reason, or you don't have a projection file with your Revit file, you can go ahead and I think I'm still, can you pop me over the 4? With the Revit model, you'll see a manage, and when you click on this layer, if this was a feature class, you would see appearance and a data tab and everything. Because this is a Revit model, I can go ahead and define the projection, or I can go ahead and move this scene around and actually it'll say move to display. And there is a Don Keane has a video up about how to kind of define your projection and to move Revit models in ArcGIS Pro. There's a walkthrough video live that I can show you the link to later. Cool. Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for coming.
Thank you.